As a seasoned investigator, I once handled a case that began with a beautiful woman reporting an extramarital affair. However, as the investigation unfolded, it became chillingly apparent that the subject of her infidelity was inexplicably not among the living. The sequence of events started simply enough. A tall, elegant, and sophisticated woman walked into the precinct to report a fraud. Following standard protocol, we brought her in for a routine interview. She identified herself as Deep Quinn Chu, a 30-year-old office worker. She claimed that because she possessed excellent personal prospects, she had been highly selective about marriage and was still single, waiting for the right person. On the surface, these details seemed utterly ordinary, but the deeper we went into the interview, the more peculiar the situation became. First, despite claiming to have been defrauded, Deep Queen Chu remained remarkably calm. She seemed entirely unbothered by the loss of her money. As she recounted how she met the perpetrator, her tone was practically dripping with affection. Second, she displayed none of the modesty or hesitation typically seen in unmarried women discussing intimate matters. For her, having a sexual relationship with this man seemed completely natural. Yet, observing her demeanor, one could never describe her as promiscuous. She was merely incredibly relaxed, though a faint trace of exhaustion lingered around her eyes. The substance of her complaint was a classic playbook scheme. A man, operating under the guise of deep romance, had provided her with a passionate and emotionally refined relationship. Eventually, using the pretext of starting a business, he convinced her to hand over hundreds of millions of dong, equivalent to tens of thousands of dollars, and then vanished. It reeked of a textbook romance scam. After concluding the initial interview, I processed her fraud report according to regulations and ran a background check on her personal information. The results caught me off guard. According to the National Household Registration Database, Deep Quinn Chu was legally married, though neither she nor her husband were registered locally. In other words, she had used the pretense of a standard dating relationship to engage in a sexual affair with someone other than her spouse. I could not help but look closely at the woman sitting across from me. With her fair skin, tall stature, and striking features, she was undeniably alluring, yet nothing in her behavior suggested she was a woman of loose morals. I decided to be direct. I informed her that her actions constituted an extramarital affair and were morally compromised. I assured her that while we would officially open a fraud investigation, I expected absolute honesty regarding the details, warning her not to conceal or fabricate anything. Upon hearing this, Deep Queen Chu's expression shifted dramatically. Hesitantly, she asked if we could speak privately in a different area. Slightly taken aback, but noticing the profound distress on her face, I escorted her to an adjacent reception room. The moment we stepped inside, she shut the door and cast a cautious glance outside. Her demeanor had entirely transformed. It was as if she were terrified of something unseen. "I am indeed married," she began haltingly, "but my husband's situation is a bit unique." Leaning in close, she whispered that her husband was disabled, bedridden at home, and completely paralyzed due to a severe injury. She had been living away from home for years to make a living, and had not returned. I told her that while this had no bearing on her police report, my personal advice was to seek a divorce. Pursuing personal happiness was her right, but her current method was ethically fraught. "He won't agree," she replied. "I have tried. But the man I am seeing now, my husband knows about him, and he actually gave us his blessing to be together." I stared at her in disbelief. In the course of police work, while such unconventional arrangements are not entirely unheard of, it was the first time I had encountered one personally. I had heard veteran detectives share similar, unbelievable anecdotes, but experiencing it firsthand left me at a loss for words. Ultimately, I reasoned that this was a domestic matter. She was here to report a financial fraud, not her infidelity. Yet, I now somewhat understood why she had insisted on a private room. This was not the kind of story one broadcasts in a crowded station. But I was mistaken. Her need for privacy stemmed from a completely different reason. Day Quinn Chu hesitated before revealing that, despite the man taking her money, she harbored no resentment toward him. The sum was substantial, but compared to the sacrifices he had made for her, she felt it was entirely worth it. In fact, both she and her paralyzed husband were deeply grateful to him. Let alone him leaving without a word, She told me verbatim, even if he had openly asked for the money, we would have given it to him. At this point, I was completely baffled. If that was the case, why come to the police at all? The core issue, she explained with a sudden look of intense anxiety, was that he was missing. I am not related to him, and I do not know any of his family, she said. The only way I could find him was by coming to the police. It finally dawned on me she was using the fraud report as a pretext. She wanted law enforcement to track down her lover. I asked her how she knew he was missing. She might just be jumping to conclusions. Perhaps he was away on business or tied up with work and had not had a chance to tell her. That is impossible, she insisted, her voice trembling. She explained that she had been unable to reach him for nearly a month. Driven by desperation, she had finally gone to his residence. Up until then, they had only ever met in public or at hotels. It was her first time visiting his home. His neighbors told me, her eyes widened with sheer terror, that he has been dead for several years. This was the bizarre extramarital case I had inherited. The lover of this beautiful woman was, allegedly, not a living human being. As a staunch atheist, I naturally dismissed the supernatural implications with a quiet scoff. I waited for her to finish before asking for the man's name. She provided the name Cain Nin along with some basic biographical details. Using the identification number she provided, I logged into the national database. The results were startling. The system clearly indicated that the individual was deceased. His household registration had been permanently canceled due to his passing. Surprised, I pointed to the monitor and asked Deep Quinn Chu, "Is this him?" "That is exactly him." She nodded firmly, though her eyes darted away in discomfort. "I have seen this exact photo." "Are you absolutely sure?" I pressed, looking at the grainy ID image. "Of course," she replied. "It was because I saw this specific ID card that I was able to find his home address." I asked how long they had been together. "About a year," she answered without hesitation. I quickly did the math. Exactly 1 year, short only a few days. My heart skipped a beat. If her timeline was accurate, Deep Quinn Chu had been having a physical affair with a dead man for a full year. And according to the neighbor, the man had passed away years prior. The case had just become infinitely more complex. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and headed to the back room to change into plainclothes, deciding to accompany her to Cain Nin's address to investigate further. Contrary to what movies depict, unless officers are on official, highly visible duty, we rarely wear our uniforms out on field investigations due to strict procedural regulations. Leaving the station, Deep Quinn Chu hailed a taxi, and we headed toward the address on the ID card. During the ride, I questioned her about how the relationship began. She explained they had met at a coffee shop. Finding a mutual connection, they exchanged contact information and slowly began dating. Noticing the age gap on his profile, I asked, "He was older than you. Was he single?" A look of deep guilt washed over her face. "No," she admitted. "He had a family." So, they were both cheating, I thought to myself, offering a polite smile but keeping the observation quiet. I then asked her to explain why her husband not only knew about the affair, but permitted it. My question clearly piqued the taxi driver's curiosity. He let out a muffled gasp of surprise, quickly covering it with a fake cough. Deep Quinn Chu looked distinctly uncomfortable, but relented. "Since I have already told you this much, I might as well tell you everything," she sighed, visibly relaxing. She laid out her history. Years ago, she and her husband ran a lucrative clothing business and enjoyed a comfortable life. But a catastrophic accident left her husband completely stripped of his ability to work or move. While she could have managed the business alone, her husband required constant, round-the-clock care. She could not do both. Fortunately, they had substantial savings, so she abandoned the business to dedicate herself entirely to nursing him. Eventually, her husband realized this arrangement was unsustainable. They had no children and relatively few burdens. But if she stayed tethered to his bedside, they would both be dragged down into ruin. He urged her to go back out into the world and work. She initially refused, but his persistence wore her down. Leaving him in the care of his parents, Deep Quinn Chu moved alone to a neighboring city to start over. Blessed with striking features and an elegant figure, she had always been known as a local beauty in her hometown. In the big city, she attracted a swarm of suitors. Yet she was inherently gentle, dutiful, and fiercely disciplined, refusing to let herself be swayed. However, long-term isolation in an unfamiliar city inevitably bred profound loneliness. The emotional void became suffocating. It was during this vulnerable period that Count Nin appeared. Initially, she was highly guarded and maintained strict boundaries, but they clicked on an intellectual and emotional level that was undeniable. Over several meetings, she found him to be incredibly cultured, polite, and deeply respectful. He never made an inappropriate advance or crossed any lines, which provided her with a sense of immense safety and prompted her to lower her defenses. Despite this, the emotional affair filled her with crushing guilt. After agonizing over it, she confessed everything to her paralyzed husband back home. Naturally, he was devastated, but his response was laced with utter helplessness. Given his physical state, Deep Quin Chu could not bear to ask for a divorce. A few times she had tried to broach the subject of ending the marriage, but he would cut her off immediately. It was clear he loved her deeply and was terrified of losing her. Eventually, during their phone calls, Deep Quin Chu began sharing the unfiltered truth of her life in the city. When her husband occasionally asked about Kane Nin, she answered with total honesty where they ate, what movies they saw, even their shopping trips. She hid nothing. Half a year into this arrangement, during a phone call, her husband let out a long sigh. He told her that if this man truly treated her well, she should make her own decisions about her body and her life. But he confessed he simply could not bring himself to leave her, begging for her forgiveness for his selfishness. Listening to her recount this, I could not help but let out a heavy sigh myself. The taxi driver, completely engrossed, was visibly moved, muttering sympathetically as we pulled up to our destination. I wondered how his mood might shift if he knew the woman whose tragic romance he was mourning was dating a corpse. Kan Nin's residence was not in a particularly remote area, but the drive still took nearly an hour, and finding the exact location required considerable effort. The house was tucked away in a narrow alleyway. The address plaque was dilapidated, the exterior paint was peeling heavily, and it bore all the hallmarks of a long abandoned property. We squeezed through the tight corridor and finally stood before the door. I knocked repeatedly, but as expected, there was no answer. After a moment's thought, I knocked on the adjacent neighbor's door. Shortly after, an elderly man with a thick head of stark white hair answered. Though his eyes were clouded with age, his gaze was remarkably piercing. I immediately produced my police badge. The old man gave a curt nod, his expression softening marginally. I held up the printed photo of Kane Nin's ID. Do you know this man? Did he live next door? Didn't she already come asking about this yesterday? The old man replied gruffly, refusing to take the photo. He stared intensely at Deep Quin Chu, who was shrinking behind me. He is a police officer. Deep Quin Chu offered timidly. Please tell him what you told me yesterday. He is dead, the old man stated, his voice rigid. That man is dead. Has been for years. What about the rest of the people in the house? I asked. We just knocked and got no response. That family of 3 is gone, the old man said, his voice dropping into a somber register. My expression tightened. What exactly happened? A traffic accident, the old man replied. A perfectly happy family wiped out just like that. I fell silent, and Deep Quin Chu's face drained of all color. The old man suddenly raised his voice, pointing at her. Who exactly is she? Why are you people here asking about this? An active criminal investigation, I replied professionally, offering no further details. I apologize for the disturbance. As we walked away, I could feel the old man's suspicious gaze tracking us down the alley. Did you only just find out that Kane Nin had a family? I asked her. Did that old man tell you? Yes. Deep Quin Chu stammered, paralyzed by fear. He was the one who told me Kane Nin had a wife and child. When we reached the end of the alley, Deep Quin Chu suddenly grabbed my arm, practically on the verge of tears. Did I attach myself to something unclean? You are overthinking it, I said gently, pulling my arm free from her freezing grasp. It is just a bit unusual. There are no ghosts in this world. I looked her dead in the eye. Don't be afraid. Before parting ways, I instructed her to leave her address and phone number. told her to wait for my call, and explicitly ordered her not to leave the city. By the time I returned to the precinct, it was late into the night. I immediately booted up my computer and began pulling detailed records on the deceased man, Kan Nin. The police files confirmed the tragedy. Years prior, Kang Nin and his family were driving through the city when their vehicle was violently T-boned by a speeding SUV, driven by a heavily intoxicated man. The entire family of 3 was killed instantly at the scene. I reached out to a colleague in the traffic division who had handled the case to verify the details. There were no hidden conspiracies or ambiguities regarding the crash. Kan Nin was, without a shadow of a doubt, dead. With this confirmation, I called Deep Quinn Chu back to the station for a follow-up interview. The man you were seeing, are you absolutely certain he is the man in this photograph? I asked directly. Think carefully. Yes. That photo on your screen is the exact photo on his ID card. I pulled it out of his wallet and looked at it with my own eyes, she insisted. She acknowledged that while the ID photo was grainy, it bore a striking resemblance to the living man she knew. She had a point. Even as a police officer, I know that people often look vastly different from their official ID portraits. If someone with a passing resemblance holds an ID card, few laypeople would ever question their identity. Did you two ever engage in a sexual relationship? I asked. Deep Quinn Chu flushed deeply, taking a long time before she hesitantly answered. Yes, but he was a bit strange. When we were together, he never once initiated intimacy, she explained. I have a good figure. I am highly attractive to men, and I am very confident in that fact. But from the time we started dating, every time we went to a hotel, I was the one who initiated it. Who booked the rooms? I asked. I always did, she murmured, but it was not because I was desperate for sex. I just did not want you to misunderstand. Were you both functioning normally? Perfectly normal, she said. He was very experienced, and I was highly satisfied. But I always had this overwhelming feeling that he just was not that interested. I raised an eyebrow, signaling her to continue. That is why I told you earlier that giving him over 100,000 was not a big deal to me, she said, shifting the topic. He absolutely was not after my body. His reactions in bed proved that to me. Most of the time we spent together, he was just caring for me, looking after me. It is no exaggeration to say we spent more time talking in bed than actually doing anything else. And honestly, I did not care about the physical aspect that much either. I do not have a very high sex drive. She looked at me earnestly. To tell you the truth, my husband and I made good money over the years. Paying for his medical care wiped out more than half of it, but we still have savings. Losing that money is something I can absorb. But did not you say he scammed you? That he claimed to be starting a business, took the cash, and ran? I countered. He said he was starting a business, but I would not call it taking the money and running, she corrected. I believed he was genuinely going into business. One day he suddenly told me he was going out of town for a venture and would not be back for a while. I offered him the money. He refused a few times, but eventually took it, promising to pay me back. I told him I did not need it back. Her voice dropped. I gave him that money completely voluntarily. But his vanishing without a trace completely blindsided me. When I could not find him anywhere, I had no choice but to track down his house, only to discover this. The color drained from her face again, as the memory of the dilapidated house resurfaced. Meanwhile, I had requested a trace on the phone number Kenyan used to contact her, but it yielded nothing. At the time, prepaid SIM cards did not strictly require full identity verification, making it impossible to pull registration data. I really loved him, but it felt like he did not love me. I am a woman. I know exactly when a man desires me and when he does not. After finding out he had a wife, I spent the last few days thinking about it. I think he just loved his wife more, she said suddenly. This case is not that simple, I told her. Deep Quinn Chu nodded. She took a few steps toward the door, then turned back. He won't come looking for me, will he? I smiled. Isn't the reason you filed this report because you could not find him? Are you scared now? I am very conflicted. I am terrified of him coming to find me, but I also desperately want him to, she admitted. When I first found out he was dead, I was horrified. But now it does not seem to matter. He never did anything to hurt me. I waved her off. Don't overcomplicate it. Just go home. I meant what I said. The situation was not inherently supernatural. The man she was seeing was undeniably a living person who had dated a woman for a year, maintained a sexual relationship with her, but somehow ended up carrying the identity of a deceased man. The narrative was full of gaping holes. In this seemingly terrifying, ghostly tale, there was undoubtedly a rational, hidden truth. Based on her testimony, this Kang Nin did not fit the profile of a gold digger. A year is an incredibly long time for a con artist to invest. He spent a year being attentive and emotionally present, seemingly disinterested in her body, and strangely ungreedy regarding her money. And the target was an exceedingly beautiful, vulnerable woman. None of it made sense. Furthermore, she had explicitly mentioned having far more savings than what she gave him. If he were a professional scammer solely after a payout, why would not he vet her financial background and drain her dry in one massive strike? Scammers operate on a hit-and-run philosophy. They do not show mercy. Yet, the way he vanished into thin air perfectly mirrored the exit strategy of a fraudster. So who exactly was this man? I was racking my brain, hitting dead end after dead end, when a few days later, an elderly man showed up at the precinct. When a colleague told me someone was asking for me by name, I was puzzled. When I walked out and saw him, I was even more confused. It took me a few seconds to recognize the white-bearded, loud-voiced man. It was the neighbor from Kang Nin's alley. The old man looked at me with a triumphant, smug expression, his chin jutting out. "Young man, remember me?" I do. I nodded quickly. "I came to ask you some questions." "How did you know who I was or where to find me?" I asked, genuinely curious. "You showed me your police badge." "Did you forget?" He grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. "I have a sharp memory. Your name and precinct were right there." "You have a great eye," I complimented him sincerely. "You have got the makings of a detective." "I would not go that far," he said, puffing up with pride and raising an eyebrow. "I am here to report something. Someone is burning joss paper next door to my house." His expression suddenly turned deadly serious. My heart hammered in my chest. I asked him for the details. "Someone is burning paper." He lowered his voice, leaning in close. "Every night there is a woman standing at the door, crying and burning spirit money. I am fine with it." His voice rose again. "But my family is terrified. My wife won't stop nagging me about it every single night." He paused, then added reluctantly, It does make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. It has been happening for days now. Always just past midnight. Someone burning paper right at the gate with the sound of a woman sobbing. It fades in and out. It is bone-chilling. An image of Deep Queen Chu's tall silhouette instantly flashed in my mind. I waved my hand reassuringly. "I understand. It won't happen tonight. You can rest easy." "Really?" The old man's eyes widened. "Can you guarantee that?" "I guarantee it," I said confidently, tapping my chest. Then a thought occurred to me. "Didn't you go outside to check who it was?" I was busy," he stammered suddenly, glaring at me for a few seconds before adding, "couldn't go." I chuckled internally. It seemed the old man was not quite as brave as he pretended to be. As soon as he left, I dialed Deep Queen Chu's number. When she answered, her voice was weak and she sounded entirely drained. I did not mince words. "Are you going over to Kang Nin's house to burn joss paper? Stop doing it. You are terrifying the neighbors. I told you, this is not as complicated as you think. Stop letting your imagination run wild. I am actively investigating the case, so please, put an end to this nonsense." There was a long silence on the other end. Thinking the signal had dropped, I raised my voice. Suddenly, a piercing scream erupted from the phone, as if I had terrified her. "What are you talking about?" "Who is burning joss paper?" she shrieked. I was stunned. "Isn't it you?" "Why would I go burn joss paper?" she yelled again. "Isn't the situation scary enough already? You think I would run to his front door and burn spirit money? Do you think I am insane?" This time, I was the one struck silent. I could not formulate a response. Through the receiver, I heard her processing the information. You mean, someone else is going there to burn paper? And you suspected it was me? Yes, I admitted. I assumed it was you, since it is not. I am going to have to go check out the scene myself. The situation was undeniably growing stranger by the minute. Can I come with you? She asked. Until this is resolved, I won't have a moment's peace. I agreed, and we arranged to meet in front of the precinct at 9:00 p.m. to head over together. At 9:00 p.m., the sky was pitch black, and a sharp wind was howling in gusts. Deep Queen Chu was dressed entirely in black, waiting for me outside. Seeing me, she hurried over, muttering something under her breath. Let us go, I said. I need you to mentally prepare yourself. Whatever you see tonight, do not panic. Her eyes widened in the dark, making her look particularly ghostly. She frantically asked what we were going to see. I relayed the neighbor's report about the woman burning offerings, sternly reminding her that regardless of who the person was, she must remain calm and not interfere with my investigation. She nodded silently, too scared to utter a word. We hailed a taxi and rode in complete silence. The alleyway was devoid of streetlights. I considered using my phone's flashlight, but worried it would give away our position, so we relied on the faint moonlight to feel our way forward. Ahead stood the massive black gate of the house. Under the moonlight, the peeling paint gave it an incredibly grim, almost spectral aura. I noticed a line of vehicles parked along the side of the road, signaled to Deep Quin Chu, and ducked behind the rear of a large car. She mimicked my movements, crouching down beside me. From this vantage point, we had a clear view of the gate. Sure enough, there was a dark, charred stain on the steps, likely ash left over from previous paper offerings. The old man had not been lying. I glanced over at the neighbor's house. The lights were on, but there was dead silence, as if the place were completely deserted. According to the old man, the ritual began at midnight. We had arrived just before 11,000 p.m., meaning we had a wait ahead of us. Despite my prior warnings to dress warmly, the sheer eeriness of the environment was clearly getting to her. She gripped my arm with both hands and refused to let go. Don't tense up, I whispered, turning my head to her. Ghosts do not exist. By the way, has anyone tried looking for you or calling you these past few days? I asked, checking my watch. Deep Quin Chu shook her head, keeping her eyes locked on the gate. Is that phone number still turned off? I pressed, unwilling to let the lead go. No, she suddenly replied. I tried calling a few times. The phone is on, but no one answers. I called twice and then stopped. She hesitated before adding, but on the other end, I could hear breathing. Someone was inhaling and exhaling. I do not know if it was him or Ligot, or even if it was human. Her voice began to tremble violently. If it was not human, it would not be breathing. I reiterated my steadfast belief. There are no ghosts. What is that? Deep Quin Chu's eyes suddenly glazed over as she stared straight ahead, gasping. I followed her gaze and froze. I had not realized when it happened, but a dark, hunched mass had appeared in front of the gate. It was about half a meter tall and roughly human-shaped. Then a flame sparked. In the darkness, it grew like a lit lantern, casting a feeble, sickly light. The flame steadily expanded, dancing until it formed a small bonfire. With the light, the scene became clear. It was indeed a person, an elderly woman. Her deeply wrinkled face resembled a scarred, graying fortress wall. Hands as thin as withered branches tossed yellow joss paper, sheet by sheet, into the fire, while her mouth moved in a constant silent mutter. Her eyes were entirely obscured by a tangled mess of wild hair. Beside me, Deep Quin Chu arched her back like a terrified cat. I firmly pressed her down with one hand. Hold steady. Let us just watch. For now, I gritted through my teeth. What is she doing? She is burning paper offerings. The real question is, who is she? And who is she burning them for? We watched in absolute silence as the old woman systematically burned through the thick stack of paper until nothing but a fresh pile of ash remained on the ground. I noted that the lights in the neighbor's house had long since been extinguished. The alley was pitch black, as dead as a graveyard. The dark mass finally stood up. She was incredibly short and walked with a severe tremble. "It is time," I muttered, slowly standing up to confront her. Before I could take a step, Deep Quinn Chu yanked me back. "Look at what she is doing," she hissed, her grip like a vice. I suppressed a shiver. Her hands were ice cold. The old woman had dropped to her knees. I quickly crouched back down, watching in bewilderment as her shoulders began to heave. Within moments, the faint, high-pitched sound of sobbing drifted through the cold air. "She is crying." I recalled the old man's description. The scene was genuinely unnerving: the dead of night, the suffocating darkness, the flickering embers on the ground, and the intermittent, spectral wailing that sounded like an arcane incantation. It was enough to make anyone's blood run cold. I checked my watch. It was nearly 1000 a.m. I stood up, walked briskly over to the old woman, and gently tapped her shoulder. She whipped her head around, her face twisted in pure terror. She stumbled backward, crashing into the still warm pile of ash, and scrambled frantically to the side. "Why are you burning offerings here, madam?" I asked. Her cloudy eyes peered at us through her disheveled hair, scanning us from head to toe without saying a word. Remembering protocol, I pulled out my badge and flashed it, not caring if she could read it in the dark, and announced that I was a police officer. At the word police, a violent shudder ran through her body. It took her several moments to muster the courage to mumble that she was just here to pay her respects. "Paying respects to the man who lived here," Deep Quinn Chu interjected, naming Kane Nin. "It is him," the old woman confirmed. "Why are you praying to him?" I asked. "I am not just praying to him. I am praying to his whole family," the old woman muttered. "It is karma." "Was your family involved in the car crash that killed them?" Deep Quinn Chu suddenly demanded. "No," the old woman shrieked, startling me. "We did not even know him." She appeared hyper-stressed and on the verge of a breakdown. "Then, what are you praying for?" I asked, utterly bewildered. I had assumed she was a relative of the drunk driver, though she hardly looked the part. "I am praying on behalf of my son," she cried out. "He committed a grave sin." The pieces were beginning to fall into place. "What do you mean?" I pressed. "My son came home and told me he was being haunted by the man who lived here," she said, tears streaming down her face as she looked up at us. "I had no choice but to come here and beg them to spare my boy." I instructed her to move to the side and rest, telling her to take her time, explaining. Deep down, I already had a solid theory. I just needed the confirmation. We helped the old woman sit on a wooden crate behind a parked truck, waiting as she gasped for air. Deep Quinn Chu thought for a moment, then pulled a bottle of water from her crossbody bag and offered it to her. Catching her breath, the old woman explained that her son refused to work an honest job, got involved in shady dealings, and was now suffering the karmic backlash. "What does your son look like?" Deep Quinn Chu interrupted abruptly. I glanced at her. We were clearly on the same page. Square face, fair skin, average build. The old woman was cut off before she could finish. "Does he walk with his left shoulder higher than his right? Does he have a mole right in the middle of his back?" Deep Quinn Chu asked rapidly. The old woman stared in shock. "How did you know that?" "It is him," Deep Quinn Chu said, turning to me. "This is his mother." With the picture nearly complete, I turned to the old woman and asked for her son's name. She gave it. While Deep Quinn Chu looked completely lost in confusion, the entire case had just crystallized in my mind. "Do you know that your son stole the identity of the deceased man from this house?" I asked her. "If I had known, do you think I would have let him do something so wicked?" She wailed. "It is a sin." "Where is your son right now?" I demanded. She told us he had fallen ill and had been confined to the house recently. He had tried to hide his condition, but noticing his bizarre behavior, she had relentlessly interrogated him until he confessed everything. Being superstitious, she believed that such a spiritual offense required burning offerings for 3 consecutive days to beg for mercy and gauge the spirit's forgiveness. "Who is the other party?" "Who hired him?" Deep Quinn Chu asked, her voice shaking. The old woman went dead silent. She slowly raised her head, locking her sharp, piercing eyes onto Deep Quinn Chu in a long, profound stare. Understanding the unspoken tension, we did not press the matter further on the street. The most urgent task was bringing the imposter into custody. It proved incredibly easy. The very next day, he walked into the precinct, trailed by his trembling mother. I placed Deep Quinn Chu in the observation room behind the two-way mirror. She took one look, clamped a hand over her mouth in shock, and nodded emphatically. Standing face to face with the man named Vuong Dao, I was taken aback. He looked utterly emaciated, his face carrying the distinct ashen pallor of a severely ill man, yet beneath the sickness, he was clearly heavily built. This discrepancy was jarring. "Why do you have Kanin's ID card?" I asked, pouring him a glass of water. He glanced back at his mother, sitting in the distance. "Someone gave it to me." "Who?" I asked. "And why would someone give you another person's identification?" To my surprise, Vuong Dao confessed. It was a fake ID, a forgery. So someone had provided him with a counterfeit document. Why? Vuong Dao fell silent. After a few seconds of staring at his mother, he asked, "Could you ask my mom to step outside for a minute?" His mother was fiercely resistant, keeping her eyes glued to her son. I had to ask a female colleague to use a mix of gentle persuasion and firm police authority to finally escort her to the waiting area. "All right, speak," I said. "What is the real story here?" "I swear to you, I did not know the guy was dead," Vuong Dao began, his face twisting as if he were about to cry. "If you beat me to death, I still would not have done it if I knew. A year ago, I was offered a job." He paused, then continued. "I do not have a steady career, but I have got a smooth way with words. I like making friends, and I have been through my share of failed relationships." I immediately cut through the nonsense. "You are a professional romance scammer, a gigolo. You use dating as a front to con women out of food, money, and sex. Is that right?" Vuong Dao dropped his head, conceding the point. "You could say that. But I just grift for meals and a little romance. The women were always willing participants. I would not strictly call it a scam." I ordered him to get to the point. "A year ago, a guy tracked me down and straight up told me to impersonate someone else. I thought it was weird at first. But then he dropped 100,000 in cash right in front of me. My eyes lit up. I am in my 40s. I have only worked a legitimate job for 3 years of my life, and I live off my mother." For a fleeting second, genuine shame flickered across his face. I feel guilty about it. I asked him why he wanted me to do this. When he told me what the job was, I was floored. He wanted me to go seduce a married woman. I thought, this is too good to be true, especially after he showed me her picture. She was gorgeous, incredibly attractive. "Who hired you?" I asked evenly. "An old guy over 60, Vuong Dao replied. I asked him how he found me. He told me to mind my own business and just tell him if I wanted the job or not. I originally wanted to ask why he was doing this. What if her husband was a cop? I have run into that before. Almost got locked up before I even got to first base. But the old man assured me it was fine. He said her husband was completely paralyzed. When I first met her, I fished around for information, and once she confirmed it, I felt totally safe." "So you just took the job blindly?" I asked. "You did not wonder why someone was paying top dollar for you to play this game?" "Why would I ask? Besides, with this kind of work, once the romance runs its course, you just fake a reason to break up and walk away. You take the money, and you are happy. I am highly experienced in this field. You have to play hard to get. If you act desperate, you blow the whole operation. That is why I took it so slow at first." Seeing him getting carried away bragging about his skills, I snapped, "Are you giving a lecture here?" Vuong Dao shrank back immediately, nodding apologetically. "Right, sorry. Anyway, I eventually succeeded, but it took a lot of effort. But from what I understand, you were not exactly enthusiastic about sleeping with her," I noted. "Why?" "It was not that I was not interested." Vuong Dao emphasized every word carefully. "It was that I was terrified. When the old man gave me the fake ID, he said he picked me because I looked a lot like the guy in the picture. I do not know how he found out about my talents with women, but he did. But what he did not tell me was that the guy in the picture was a corpse. By the time I found out, I was in too deep. She trusted me completely by then. She was convinced I was madly in love with her. But every time I remembered I was pretending to be a dead man, my blood ran cold. How could I possibly get in the mood to take her to bed? How did you find out the man was dead? I pressed. I went to the address on the ID. I was paranoid about blowing my cover, so I sneaked over there to scope it out. It was an abandoned ruin. Nobody lived there. Then I bumped into this old lady next door. I tried to casually ask her about the house, and she looked at me like I was an alien. Finally, she blurted out that the whole family was dead. As I walked away, she kept turning her head to stare at me. Guang Dao let out a bitter laugh. It was only later I realized she was staring because I looked like the dead neighbor. I scared her half to death. If you knew you were impersonating a dead man, why did not you bail immediately? Greed, he sighed, heavily. I knew this beautiful woman had money. I got greedy. I kept hesitating, unwilling to walk away empty-handed. Then one day she sat me down and told me everything about her life, her family, her paralyzed husband. I listened to the whole thing. She was genuinely a tragic figure. I felt bad for her. I decided right then I was going to make an excuse and disappear. But then she voluntarily offered me money. I am a greedy man by nature, so I took it. But I did not dare take too much. You did not take too much, I scoffed coldly. She gave you 150,000, and you did not turn it down. I do not know what script you used, but you absolutely conned her out of that money. Based on the timeline, you grabbed exactly 150,000 because you were in a rush to run away, and that was all you could get your hands on quickly, was not it? What exactly did she tell you? I stared him down, applying maximum pressure. I deal with scum like you every day. Vuong Dao forced a dry chuckle, offering no defense. Honestly, I did not even use a script. I just acted a little pathetic. So she handed over the cash. She told me the rest of her savings were locked in the bank and could not be transferred immediately. But I gave 100,000 of it back to the old man, Vuong Dao proclaimed defensively. I refused to earn a living by pretending to be a dead man. Oh, what a gentleman, I replied sarcastically. And what about the other 50,000? You are right. I wanted to give it back to her too, he stammered. But I was too ashamed to face her. And I think karma caught up with me. Ever since I took that money, my body just fell apart. My head spins, my vision blurs. I feel like I am floating when I walk, and my vision is filled with black spots. Food tastes like ash. I went to the hospital, and they could not find a single thing wrong with me. That is how my mom found out. One day, I was walking down the street completely zoned out and almost got hit by a car. Combined with how sick I have been, my mom knew something was deeply wrong. She grilled me until I finally linked it all back to this job. She was furious. She slapped me so hard I saw stars. She is deep into the spiritual stuff, demanded to see the fake ID, and then forbade me from ever speaking of it again. If you had not found me, I would not have even known she was out there burning joss paper. As for how she found the house, Vuong Dao added, I have absolutely no idea. You mentioned Deep Quine Chu confided in you once, I said, thinking deeply. What exactly did she say? Just family stuff, Vuong Dao replied. Crazy coincidence, right? Her husband was paralyzed in a traffic accident too. I have the worst luck, getting dragged into this absolute nightmare. In that instant, a lightning bolt of realization struck me. A wild, horrifying deduction snapped into place. I demanded, Vuong Dao, give me the contact information for the old man who hired him. We need to bring him in for a conversation. Vuong Dao provided it eagerly. What about me? Go home and wait, I told him. This case is not closed, but your role in the larger conspiracy is minor. However, you are not escaping the fraud charges. And another thing, I patted his shoulder firmly, returning the money is the right move. Scrape together that remaining 50,000 and give it back. Who knows? Maybe your illness will clear right up. I gave him a pointed look. Vuong Dao looked utterly terrified. Once he was gone, I headed straight to the traffic division to pull the archives. Everything finally made sense. When the old man walked into the interrogation room, I was still caught off guard by the resemblance. They look exactly alike, I thought to myself. Of course they do. They were father and son. The old neighbor from the alleyway looked at my badge. A flicker of panic crossed his face, but he rapidly masked it, regaining his composure. I did not waste time. Your son, his wife, and your grandchild died in a traffic accident. Is that correct? Yes, the old man answered, without a second of hesitation. A family of 3. His voice cracked, thick with sudden, overwhelming grief. My entire family, all gone. And the husband of this woman, I placed Diep Quin Chu's photograph on the table in front of him, was the driver who killed them. It was him. The old man's teeth ground together, his eyes burning with absolute, unadulterated hatred. My son was driving perfectly in his lane. That bastard T-boned them at full speed. My children were such careful drivers, and he slammed into them so hard, the car flipped into the embankment. My whole family, he roared, tears spilling over. My little grandson, all gone. The old man dropped his head, his heavy, agonizing sobs echoing in the small room. So you hired someone to seduce his wife, I said quietly. I exhaled a long breath. And you had this man impersonate your dead son. Why? I wanted to kill him, the old man confessed. But I did not dare. I knew it was murder. But I could not live with the injustice. This was the only way. My plan was to eventually let him find out that his wife was sleeping with my son, the old man explained, detailing a plot of unimaginable psychological warfare. I wanted him to think my dead son had come back from the grave for revenge. I wanted to scare him to death. But I never expected that idiot gigolo to find out the truth and run away. The woman is innocent, I told him softly. Your actions destroyed her too. I did not care. The old man shot back. My wife passed away from the grief. I am entirely alone in this world. If I had the physical strength, I would have strangled him with my bare hands. I will be honest with you, detective. This was only phase 1. I had more planned. But it is all useless now, he sighed, the fight draining out of him. He lives too far away. I only found out by chance that his wife had moved to this city to work. That is when I came up with the idea. You are right, she is innocent. He lowered his voice. But was not my family innocent? His family paid whatever restitution they could, and the court sentenced him, but because he was paralyzed, he never served a day in a cell. When he ran out of money and left the hospital, I used to pace back and forth outside his house with a knife. So many times, I steeled myself to rush in and butcher him. I wanted to kill him so badly. The old man's voice was utterly devoid of hope, but I could not bring myself to do it. I looked into the bloodshot, broken eyes of the old man, completely at a loss for words. After a long silence, I finally spoke. You have suffered more than I can comprehend. It is not my place to judge your pain. But for forging a national identity document, you will have to answer to the law. I will carry it, the old man replied with perfect calm. I did the crime. I will do the time. I know what I did was illegal. The only reason I still keep that empty house is because I miss them so much. He mumbled softly, almost to himself. Everyone else thinks the house is terrifying, but I am not scared. If I could just see them one more time, I would give anything. As the old man was led away, his hunched silhouette looked unimaginably lonely and adrift. I later relayed the entire, unvarnished truth to Diep Quin Chu. She sat in absolute silence for a very long time. Finally, she looked up, her face drenched in tears. She sniffled, stood up, and bowed to thank me. Vuong Dao returned the rest of the money to me, she said quietly. At least I know he is a living, breathing person. I am not going to press fraud charges against him. I just hope this terrified him enough to live an honest life from now on. As for my husband's actions, I have cried until I have no tears left. With a sin that massive on his soul, I can't find it in my heart to blame the old man for what he did to me. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper, if it is possible. I would like to see the photograph of their family. My colleague in the traffic division had sent the file over earlier. I turned my monitor toward her. Diep Quin Chu took one look at the smiling family of 3, and fresh tears poured down her cheeks. What a beautiful family, she whispered, her voice breaking. If I had been in the car with my husband that night, maybe everything would be different. This remains the most profoundly tragic case of infidelity I have ever witnessed. Many people fail to grasp a fundamental truth. we are all ultimately held accountable for our actions. It is the unyielding law of how this world operates. Often, the consequences do not manifest immediately. They lie dormant, like a hidden fracture in the foundation, quietly lying in wait within the mundane details of life. And then one day, the slightest tremor triggers a storm beyond human comprehension. One can only hope that those who are decent and innocent never find themselves standing in the eye of that storm.